is Sir Duncan the Tall, Coldhands. It's been a small fan theory for a while, but has recently got a new lease of life through A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, so let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. If you like theories, background, history and lore about A Song of Ice and Fire, The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher, this is the place for you. Welcome. Might Coldhands, that undead ex-Night's Watchman that escorts Bran and co to Bloodraven's cave north of the Wall in A Song of Ice and Fire, actually be Sir Duncan the Tall? To be honest, I did a whole other video a couple of years ago on who Coldhands might be, and I don't think I mentioned Dunk once, primarily because it was accepted by the vast majority of the fandom that he died in the tragedy at Summerhall. Dying in a towering inferno near dawn to an undead ice zombie or whatever he is north of the Wall wearing Night's Watchman clothes is not an easy transition to explain. But we recently got what may have been a spoiler from the cast of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Dexter Sol-Ansel, who plays Egg in the show, let slip that apparently Dunk survives Summerhall. Just as an aside here, I hope Dexter doesn't beat himself up about that at all. The fandom loved it, and it's more a bit of speculation than a spoiler. The show and books will still end at Summerhall if we ever get there, and he's doing a fantastic job as Egg. Really, really good casting. Anyway, if we are to take this as truth from George himself, the implication is that George told them their characters' fates, then that means we do need to consider what Dunk might have done after the tragedy. We should start by facing up to the reality that we've never been clearly told that he did die at Summerhall. It was just heavily implied. The most full account we have of what happened there is an ink-blotted maester's note that says this: "The blood of the dragon gathered in 7 eggs to honour the 7 gods, though the king's own Septon had warned pyromancers. Wildfire. Flames grew out of control, towering, burned so hot that died, but for the valour of the Lord Command." Which is all a bit cryptic. We know that King Aegon V died, as did his son Duncan the Small and his wife Jenny of Oldstones, and lots of other people. There were some survivors, but they didn't want to talk about it. Dunk did something valorous, then disappeared. We'll leave what honourable and valorous thing he might have done to another video, because the important point here is that he then disappeared from the accounts that we have. With his best friend dead and an unsympathetic court now in place, he just decided to slip away and let everyone assume he died along with the rest. But he never really was one for stealth or subtlety. It doesn't seem very honourable, and by that point he was one of the most recognisable people in the land. Perhaps even the most recognisable, given his stature and fame. Perhaps the new King Jaehaerys II decided he wanted his people in the Kingsguard and sent Dunk to the Wall as a punishment, but given the way his contribution at Summerhall was recorded as valorous, and how old Nan and Jaime both passingly reference him in positive ways, implies there was no shame or punishment attached to his memory. Which leaves perhaps the most likely outcome being that Dunk, broken-hearted at the loss of Egg, nearing the end of his own working career — he was probably in his late 60s by this point, and perhaps feeling the guilt of a Lord Commander of the Kingsguard unable to prevent a king's death, felt that the honourable thing to do would be to join the Night's Watch. Dunk was nothing if not a true knight, a knight who remembered his vows. It will have stung to have failed his friend and his vows, even if he was doing the right valorous thing at the time, as I suspect he was. And Dunk does have a lot of connections to the Wall. He wonders whether his father might be there. Maybe, Dunk thinks, they just sent him to the Wall. When I was squiring for Sir Arlan, I would ask him if we couldn't go up that way someday to take service at Winterfell or some other northern castle. I had this notion that if I could only reach the Wall, might be I'd come on some old man, a really tall man, who looked like me. At one point, he ponders whether someone might have sent him there before Sir Arlan chose him to be his squire. He says he always wanted to go there. The Swan Sword's last sentence is Egg saying that he wanted to go to the Wall because it was tall, like Dunk. Daemon II Blackfire, who gets dragon dreams, remember, asks Dunk if he's seen the Wall, something so random that even Dunk wonders why he's asking, and George R. R. Martin has confirmed that Dunk and Egg's journeys will take them to the Wall. That's a lot of Wall references for 3 short novellas set at the other end of the continent. And in the wider world of Ice and Fire, there are even more connections. When Bloodraven and Maester Aemon went to the Wall, Egg insisted Dunk escorted them there personally. Eamon, Egg's favourite sibling, was obviously still there when we're wondering whether Dunk went there. 2 members of the Night's Watch in A Song of Ice and Fire, Gren and Small Paul, are also both hinted as potentially being descendants of Dunk, both being thick as a castle wall. It does seem a little odd that we wouldn't have heard about Dunk joining the Night's Watch anywhere in the stories and histories we have so far, but George R. R. Martin is intent on keeping details of it from us at the moment. That ink spill on the only written record, Dany suddenly getting tired when Sir Barristan was about to tell her about Summerhall, none of the survivors wanting to talk about it, that kind of thing. George R. R. Martin failing to mention about Dunk's fate is very in character. He wants to keep the reveal for the stories. So let's say Dunk did join the Night's Watch. It makes sense that despite his age, he would then have been sorted into the Rangers rather than the Stewards or Builders. And if he had, it would make sense if he ranged north of the Wall, and perhaps was killed that way. By that point, Bloodraven will have been hooked up to the Weirwood network for perhaps nearly a decade. He will obviously have known Dunk well, and will have realised that he, Bloodraven, wouldn't now be able to personally do things out of his cave, so would need someone to work for him. Who better to choose than the loyal, honourable Dunk? So that is how we get to the idea that Coldhands might be Dunk, a series of possibilities that all in turn make sense. Going to the Wall, becoming a ranger, being brought back by Bloodraven. And there are a couple of other supportive textual hints about Coldhands if you are looking for them. When Bran asks who the Three-Eyed Crow is, Coldhands says he is a friend. That's the same word Bloodraven used when Dunk asked him who he was, when in disguise as Maynard Plum. When Coldhands' elk dies, he takes the time to show it some respect, echoing Dunk's caring attitude towards animals. And when Coldhands first appears, it is immediately after the appearance of the white Small Paul, who, as we have already noted, is quite possibly a descendant of Dunk. Which, when all added up, could build a reasonable case that Coldhands is Dunk. Though it has to be said that some of this is quite circumstantial. Friend is a very common word. Lots of people care about animals, and appearing just after Small Paul could just be a coincidence. Perhaps more compelling are the arguments on the other side, when you compare what we know of Coldhands to what we know of Dunk. First of all, the physical description. Sir Duncan the Tall is very tall. It's the first thing most people notice about him, but we don't get a description of Coldhands' height at all. Surely we would if he were 7 feet tall. That's over 2 meters 10 for the metrically minded. Neither Bran nor Sam seem to notice anything unusual there. Some have suggested that him riding such a massive elk shows he is very tall, but it kneels down for Sam and Gilly to climb on it, like a camel, say, and you don't need to be especially tall to ride a camel, so I don't think that proves much. Coldhands is described as thin and gaunt, whereas Dunk is big and strong. Coldhands has black eyes, whereas Dunk's are brown. Perhaps being an undead whatever Coldhands is does that to you, but we don't know anything about the process. Furthermore, Coldhands' character seems markedly different to Dunk's. He's colder and more callous. Dunk is a simple man and generally uses simple language, whereas Coldhands speaks with more of a flourish and with a wide vocabulary, dropping words like extremities, congeal and runnels into the conversation when simpler words were available. That doesn't sound like Dunk. He also mutters a blessing to his dying elk in some strange tongue, and seems to be able to communicate with the ravens. He understands their squawks, and they do as he wishes or needs. Again, perhaps this is all new parts of Dunk's character and skill set after decades of the undead lifestyle, but it doesn't sound like Dunk. So where does all that leave us? I think that given the apparent spoiler that Dunk survives Summerhall, we can't now rule out the idea that Dunk is Coldhands. Him joining the Night's Watch does make sense, both from a character perspective and to explain the regular references to the Wall in the Dunk and Egg stories so far. And Bloodraven choosing him for this role, if the opportunity arise, would also make sense. But as it stands, other than caring for his animals and seeming to take his vows seriously, this doesn't come across as Dunk. George R. R. Martin is a good writer, and even if he didn't want to make it obvious, he surely would have made Coldhands more Dunk-like. He doesn't talk like Dunk, or act as warm-heartedly as him. His eye colour is different, as is his physique. No one seems to notice his height, which they surely would. He can communicate with ravens, and in a private moment speaks a foreign language. So Occam's razor would suggest that this isn't Dunk. And I still quite like the answer I gave in that other video. That seems to fit the facts better. One last thought on this. There is an answer to the difference in physique, eye colour, character, language and so on, and that is perhaps whatever magic turned him into an undead whatever he is, did that to him. Beric and Lady Stoneheart both have personality changes after they come back, after all, and if Ice White's eyes turn blue, can't Coldhands have turned black? We have no evidence for any of this, but perhaps. The deeper question is, if this is undunk, and the process gave him a different physical appearance and character, is it even still Dunk? One for the philosophers. If you'd like to see more Lord of the Rings videos, please click on the link on the left of your screen. Or if you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.